Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm critiquing my old art. So I was trying to think of a video idea for this week's video, and when I do that, I sometimes scroll through my old videos that I posted, and the critiquing my viewers' art video that I made a few months ago caught my attention. I kind of wanted to do that again because many of you like those videos since they help you learn some stuff. But the problem was that I didn't have enough time to let you all know so you could submit your art. But then I thought, what if I critiqued my old art instead? So I dug out my USB flash drive and started digging through my old files. So let's see what I found. Also, like with my other critiquing videos, I'm not going to be critiquing every little thing I find wrong. I'm just going to talk about more major points. Also, I may be a bit more harsh on my old art because it's my art. I'm not worried about hurting people's feelings. So yeah, I might be a little bit more critical. So this one is called Cute Hat. The hat being cute is debatable. I made it in December of 2010, so I was like 14 years old. The first thing I am noticing is that her eyes look like they are going outwards, and it looks kind of strange. So I'm going to fix that. This seems to happen a lot in my old art. A ton of the characters have the eyes going outwards, and I think it's because I would try to place the iris in the middle of the eye. Here's an example. So I would draw the shape of the eye, and here is the technical middle point of it. I would then draw the pupil and the iris in this area. This would result in the eye going outwards. Now when I draw eyes, I draw the iris going slightly inwards. It's more towards the inner part of the eye than the outer part. I do need to be careful to not put it too close to the inside part of the eye because it also look like they're going cross-eyed. But yeah, I place the iris a little closer to the inner part than the outer part. The next thing I wanted to point out is how the clothes don't look like they are wrapping around the body. They are just going up to the edge of the body, and this makes the clothes look really flat and like they don't have volume. I'm going to do a bit of editing. I'll make the pink straps extend past the shoulders and make the gloves have a bit of a lip to them, if that makes sense. They kind of bump out a little bit. Another thing I used to do a lot was give my characters very pointy chins. They look like they could hurt people with their chin. So I'm just going to quickly round it out a little bit. The overall shape still looks a bit odd, just because the chin is kind of an odd shape. Also, just because I felt like it, I adjusted the angle of the shoulders with the liquefy tool and made the shoulders bigger because they looked too small. She looked like she had a really big head and neck, and her shoulders didn't look quite right. Okay, so here's the after and before. It's kind of interesting how changing the iris placement helped quite a lot. This illustration is called Heart Girl. I wish I could say I name my files better names now, but I don't. Like this one is called Dad because the only thing I remembered about the character at the time is that he was a dad. So the thing I want to talk about for this picture is the blending and color choices. I had just recently got Manga Studio 4 EX, and it had a blending tool which I was very excited about, but I didn't know how to use it. As you can see, the blending is very blunt and muddy. It's blunt because I didn't know what settings to choose for the tool, and it's muddy because of my color choices, and I would apply all the colors and blend them at the same time. I have filled in the section with red, and we will shade it. So this is the shading color I originally used. It's the same hue and saturation as the base color, just a bit darker. This results in a color that's a bit muddy looking. The color I would use now is darker, more saturated, and also a slightly different hue. In this case, it goes closer to the pink. And as we can see, this color is much more vibrant. Now I'll just apply this color to the head with a basic brush. I make the colors flow in a way I think the hair is going. So like I said, I didn't really know how to use the blending tool. I thought I could apply all the colors and just blend willy-nilly. But when using the blending tool, the direction you are blending is really important, and also which colors you are blending is very important. So here are the settings for my brush. I don't use these exact settings all the time. I change them depending on what I want. What was making things difficult when I was young is that I probably had color stretch all the way up. This makes it so the colors will drag all over the place and they stretch really far. Also, my brush was set to a very hard setting. I do this sometimes if I want a crisp edge, but a lot of times my brush is set to 2 or 3. So when using the blending tool, I'm doing a lot of thinking about how my pen strokes are adjusting the color. I don't only brush over the shadow colors, I'll also drag my base color into the shadow to adjust the shapes a bit. Also, a lot of times I don't make both edges soft. I'll make one side be soft and the other more sharp. This makes the shape look like it has more form since it's not all just like blended out. It has a bit of a form to it, I guess. More recently, I feel like I don't use the blending tool on the hair a ton. I use it mostly for clothes, but since in the original picture I was using the blending tool, I'll use the blending tool here. Next is the highlight color. Originally I used white, and when I blended it, it made it kind of an off pinky kind of color, and I didn't set it to add glow or anything. And so now for the highlight, I would select a color that is lighter and a slightly different hue. In this case, it's more towards the yellow. And I'll also set this to add glow because I like how add glow looks. It makes things look a little bit more shiny and vibrant. For the shape of the highlights, I draw a bunch of lines that taper at each end. I make them follow the form of the hair and also have them split where I applied the shadows earlier. That way it kind of looks like the highlights kind of hitting certain sections of the hair. It's not just going straight flat across all of the hair. It kind of breaks up a little bit. I also do a bit of erasing with a soft brush to blend things out, and also apply some gradients. So here's how the different coloring looks. The new one definitely looks a lot more vibrant and less muddy. This picture is named Innocent, and this was actually from me following a Marshmellow tutorial. I was 14 at the time and watched tons of his tutorials. Marshmellow's version turned out way more pretty, but I remember being super proud of this picture at the time because it was like, wow, I drew a character. So the first thing is that this ear is super small and is in such an odd spot. It should be something a bit more like this. Instead of drawing a new ear, let's just cover it up. We don't need to see the ear. The next thing I want to adjust is this eye. It is placed way too far to the left. It's like on the very edge of her face. So I'm going to move it inwards. Another thing that is off is the perspective. So if I draw lines coming off of the different features, all of the lines are going in different directions, but they should be going in similar directions. Her head is tilting, so it doesn't need to match her shoulders, but the facial features should all line up more similar in angle. Okay, I think that looks a bit better, but this eye over here is still looking a bit odd to me, and it's because of the pupil placement. I drew the pupil in the middle of the iris, and I can see why I would think to do that. The pupil is in the middle of the iris after all. But you see, when the head is turned, the pupil appears to be closer to the inner part of the iris. This is because the iris is a dome, it's not flat. So when I draw eyes that are turned, I place the pupil closer to the inner side. This makes the eyes look like they have more depth to them, compared to before where it just kind of looked really, really flat. Lastly, I used the liquify tool to adjust the shape of her hair a bit. It looked really skewed to one direction. And here are the before and after. I feel like I didn't change all that much, but it seemed to help a good amount, so yay! Okay, so before we continue, I want to quickly show you this super cute Yume Twins box. They are not sponsoring this video, but they were super nice and sent this box to me, and I thought all of you might find the contents of the box interesting. So basically, Yume Twins is a subscription service that sends you cute stuff from Japan, and the theme for this box was my Ghibli home. So it has tons of items themed around Studio Ghibli movies, and they are all so cute. I'm really glad I got a bunch of My Neighbor Totoro because I really like Totoro. I really love the puzzle, the bag, and these chopsticks are super cute. If you are interested in getting your own Yume Twins box, you can use the code DRAW to get $5 off. There is also a link in the description, and if you use my code, it helps support the channel. But yeah, the box is super cute and I really like it. But let's get back to critiquing my art. Okay, so now we have this illustration named Moon, even though we can't see the moon. So I actually remember working on this one for some reason, and I remember that I wanted the mountains to look like they were far in the distance, but in this case they do not look like that at all. And overall the background is a bit odd. I actually didn't like the background very much when I made it. I just couldn't understand how to make the mountains look like they're far away. So if I currently wanted to make a background that had mountains in the distance, I think I would do something more like this. I'll take the girl and put her on a grassy cliff kind of area. I'm also going to add some foliage to the foreground. I feel like this was something the original was lacking. Adding elements in the foreground can really help convey the depth of the picture. And before I didn't have anything in the foreground. Next are the mountains. Because they are far in the distance, I'm going to draw just the silhouette of them. Also, to make them look far away, I'm going to lighten them towards the bottom. This gives the illusion of fog or atmosphere and helps them look further away. I draw another layer of mountains that are a bit closer, so I have them be a bit darker in color, and I'll add a little detail to them in a bit. This green for the grass fell out of place, so I changed the color to something that is much cooler and not as saturated to kind of better fit in with the background and the purple color scheme. Now I'll add the little stars and the slight details to the mountains. This is just a quick edit, so I'm not bothering with fully rendering things. Just giving you a general idea of what I would do. Something else that felt off about the original is that it was nighttime, but the girl was shaded like it was daytime. She doesn't look like she's in the dark at all. So to make her colors fit in, I set a layer to multiply and apply a dark purple to make her colors darker. Lastly, I add some rays of light because I love them and they instantly make things feel more magical. Because I added those, I also add some light to the girl to keep things consistent. So here is the before and here's the after. I feel like this new one has the depth I was trying to capture in the original picture. So this picture is called Princess, and I remember I was super proud of this one. I had spent so much time on it, and I remember when I showed it to my mom, she said it looked like the girl was sitting on a toilet. And it kind of does. So firstly, the head is huge, so I'm going to shrink it down to make it be more in proportion. Secondly, the girl and the bench are at different perspectives. So the knees and thighs are drawn like they're coming straight towards us, but the bench is at an angle and they don't match up. If the girl was sitting with this angle of bench, we would be able to see the top of her thighs a bit more. But yeah, I drew them coming straight on instead of being tilted, but the bench is tilted. So I'll adjust the bench by making the top lower and adjust this line. The last thing I don't really like is the inconsistent shading style. So if we zoom in, we can see on the girl, I used a lot of soft shading. It's a little smoother and fades out. However, on the furniture, I use shadows with a very hard edge. I'm assuming this is because I was starting to get lazy and I also didn't really know how to shade the bench. So if you are working on a picture with multiple elements, try to keep the shading style consistent. And it is okay to use different shading depending on the texture of the object. Like some things will look more shiny and some things will look more soft. But in this case, the furniture should have had softer shading. Next we have two pictures, teen boy and 12-year-old girl. Such creative names. Okay, so I'm showing you these at the same time because they have something in common. Actually, they have several things in common, but the one I'm going to talk about are the soft highlights in the eyes. I used to think that I could make the highlights look brighter by making them soft. This just results in the eyes looking kind of weird in texture. Here's an example. So we have two green spheres. For the first one, I'm going to only use a soft brush and apply the shading in a very soft way. This results in a ball that looks kind of matte and not super reflective. But on the second sphere, I'm going to apply my shading with more hard edges. This results in a sphere that looks a lot more reflective and shiny. And because the eyes are wet and smooth, the highlights should be nice and crisp. They shouldn't be soft like they're on something fuzzy. But you know, I do actually see some artists add subtle softness to their highlights. It seems like they use Add Glow and apply it along the edges with a soft brush to add a slight glow to the highlight. Oh, you know, I actually really like that. I need to start doing this in my art. It actually looks quite pretty. It adds kind of like a subtle reflective quality to the highlight, I feel. It makes it feel very bright. I feel like I just learned something while trying to teach you something. But yeah, if you want a surface to look smooth and reflective, adding crisp highlights can help do that. Speaking of shiny objects, here's an example of what not to do. This picture is called Summer Flower. I was like 16 when I made it, and I had recently learned how to make things look shiny, and this resulted in everything looking overly shiny. Don't do this. Try to think about what the surface you're shading is made of and shade it accordingly. A lot of times skin isn't super shiny unless it's wet, so it should have shading that's a bit softer and not super reflective like this. Next we have this picture called Thanks. I drew it as a thank you for someone that drew one of my characters. First I want to say this grass looks awful. I used the Photoshop grass brush and kind of just applied it everywhere. And because this grass is so rendered, it makes this not rendered tree look really odd. Once again, it's good to be consistent. Also, the pages of this book aren't completely filled in. Okay, so enough making fun of this picture. The thing I want to talk about is the composition. We have the girl and we have this tree and then just a bunch of empty space. This makes our eyes just kind of go back and forth and it's not super interesting. And honestly, I don't know why I made this picture so long. I could have just moved the tree over and cropped it. Also, I don't like being able to see this edge here of where the horizon or the hill ends. So if I were to do this now, I would apply some more trees or some more foliage or something. Just something to kind of fill in the background a bit more. So yeah, there wasn't a need for the picture to be so long. It doesn't really do anything for the composition. When creating pictures, it's very good to keep in mind how our eye is going to move around on the picture. A lot of times you want to try to make a circle or a kind of figure 8 kind of shape. Not just a straight back and forth like this one. Lastly, we have this masterpiece called Summer, and I don't know why I felt the need to put the name here. I bet I don't need to point out what's wrong with this one. It's pretty obvious. It's the perspective. Things are looking very odd. You see, I was trying to do a view of us looking up at the character, and I was also trying to work with foreshortening and a dynamic perspective, but I had no clue what I was doing. So if we take a look at the girl and I draw some curves that follow her form, we can see we have a lot of curves that are swooping downwards, and that's not a good thing if you're trying to draw a form that we are looking up at. And here's an example. Let's say we have a cylinder with lines on it. If we look down at the cylinder, the lines will curve in a downward swoop. The cylinder also looks a bit larger at the top and gets smaller towards the bottom. This happens because the top is closer to us and it looks larger. If we look up at the cylinder, all of the lines curve in an upward swoop. Also, this time the top looks smaller because now it's further away from us. So basically, I'm just going to apply this knowledge to the form of the body. If I were to now draw a person that is sitting above us in a tree, I would do it kind of like this. I draw some slight perspective lines just to help me keep the perspective in mind. Everything should be appearing smaller as it gets further away from us. I'm breaking up the body into shapes. I also draw a bottom plane on the different parts of the body, just to help my brain understand things and how we're looking at the shapes. The major shapes I keep in mind are the ribs and the hips. So the thighs are not coming towards us, they are going outwards from the hips. So we are going to see the underside of the thighs. And then the lower legs are coming down towards us. While I'm drawing this, I'm trying to draw things a bit bigger as they get closer. Like a lot of times the length of our feet is the same as our lower arm, but because the feet are close to us, I made them bigger than the character's lower arm. This helps give a sense of perspective. The sketch I did was super messy, so I'm going to draw over it real quick to make it a bit cleaner. I'm not sure what to say as I'm doing this in the footage because I feel like I already talked about the stuff I wanted to talk about for this pose. But I guess I am a bit pleased with how this turned out. Honestly, this perspective had me a bit nervous. It's not a view I draw super often. I kept telling myself that if the pose ended up looking awful that I was going to scrap all this footage. But thankfully, I feel like it turned out decently. So as you can see, if we draw lines that follow the form of the body, all of the lines curve up in the middle. And so here's the original pose again, and the comparison. Having the ability to draw the body in perspective is a lot about understanding how shapes work in a 3D space. So if you want to draw the body in different perspectives, I recommend trying to draw different shapes in perspective first, and try to get comfortable with drawing like turned cylinders or turned blocks. and try to get comfortable with understanding those shapes in a 3D space. I do have to say, looking at my old art has given me a little bit of a confidence boost. I've been feeling a bit down about my art recently, but looking back at my old art and seeing how far I have come has helped me, I guess, appreciate my current art a little bit more. Also, I hope this video is helpful to you. I have a lot more old art we could look at, so if this is something you'd like me to do again, let me know. Maybe next time we could look at my old traditional art. Before we end, I want to say a big thank you to my super wonderful YouTube members and patrons. To get access to an exclusive Discord server and behind the scenes content, consider becoming a patron or a YouTube member. Well, that is all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!